Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am, of course, your host, Benjamin Dixon, in full podcast only mode, for a few more days while we continue to set up. There's a lot going on, so let's just jump right to it. North Korea has shot a ballistic missile across the Japanese airspace. The missile broke up into three parts, landing, and I'm going to use this phrase very loosely, but landing safely outside of Japan and into the ocean. But this creates a very complicated situation that we're going to have to honestly watch and keep our eyes on, depending on how President Abe responds and how Donald Trump responds. We can't go without having some level of tension, can we? And this really goes to this idea that North Korea, if anyone has in their mind that North Korea is innocent in this, or a non-aggressor in this equation, this is sadly wrong, right? And this should show you. And it seems weird that we even have to go through this, right? I know I'm jumping head deep into this thing, head first into this thing without a lot of backstory. But we've talked about North Korea enough for me to be able to jump into this right away. Donald Trump is reckless. Donald Trump is irresponsible. Donald Trump is a lot of things. He was reckless, entirely reckless when it came down to North Korea the first time around, when he was talking about raining fire and glory from heaven and all this ridiculous language. Completely irresponsible, and pushed us unnecessarily close to a nuclear conflict, or at least an armed conflict with North Korea. All of that, but we cannot negate or neglect to point out the fact that North Korea is an aggressor. And the people, all these people, progressives in particular, who are saying, oh, North Korea would never shoot a missile and attack the United States, et cetera, et cetera. So, of course, I guess maybe we aren't supposed to believe that they are taking a hostile position, or are we supposed to sit and allow them? Yes, I'm using that language intentionally. Are we supposed to sit and allow them to make these aggressive moves by virtue of, with the promise or the hope that progressives are giving that they're not going to attack? That's the most irresponsible international relations policy I've ever heard, second only to neoconservatism. Right? It is completely irresponsible for people to look at what North Korea did today and say, no, they're not going to attack anyone. The problem with that logic is not so much whether or not they will attack. It's how do we expect Japan to respond to this? Now, I know we have a collective defense treaty with Japan, and the United States is going to defend Japan, and this is where it becomes very sketchy. We have to see how this plays out over the next 24, 48 hours. But let's play this out based on this idea that North Korea isn't really going to attack anyone. And if America were to actually game this, and if America was actually to do this, right, let's game out how this plays. Do we expect Japan and South Korea to just say, oh, they're not going to attack us, because if they attack us, then we know the United States is going to destroy them? Does anyone actually think in this conversation that train of logic is going to go through the mind of, or whether it goes through their mind or not, is that something that we can responsibly expect Japan to act upon? This hope and this idea that North Korea would not be crazy enough, especially in light of today. No, we cannot expect Japan to operate based underneath that assumption. And if the United States fails to defend them, then this creates a more militaristic Japan, one that's going to not only create their military for defense, but potentially for offense. So, this is why North Korea's actions are so destabilizing. And this is the whole thing, man. This is what I've been saying for the last, I don't know how long we've had to talk about this issue, but it's a destabilizing force because it's going to push South Korea and and Japan to quote unquote take matters into their own hand in so much as they can, in the absence of the United States actively defending them. But and I'm going through this because it's our responsibility as thinkers. That's the only role we have in this, right? Of course, we have to live it. Some of you, I don't know if any of you who are listening actually live in Japan. I know we have quite a few overseas listeners. But outside of any of my listeners who may be in Japan or South Korea, the rest of us, our only responsibility is to think this thing through and to scream at the top of our lungs the very best policy solution that we can come up with. Unfortunately, that's all we can do. And so a part of that is to carefully and responsibly think this thing through. And if we're suggesting that no action should be taken, and okay, let me take one more step back and explain who's suggesting this. A lot of progressives with platforms, a lot of progressives who are in this position that thinks, that believes that the only aggressor in this equation is the United States, not North Korea. And this is a train of thought that is persistent in progressive circles. A lot of people, many of you I consider to be friends of mine, at least social media friends. And so, but it's our responsibility, I feel, to think these things all the way through. Now, thinking this all the way through, if we are going to suggest that the best policy for the United States in the presence of North Korea shooting a missile through the airspace of Japan, landing on the opposite side in the ocean, the best response for the United States is to be non-aggressive because North Korea wouldn't possibly attack the United States, because that would mean their destruction. Or North Korea wouldn't possibly attack South Korea or Japan because that would mean their destruction. If we are going to assume that in terms of how the United States is going to behave, then we also need to understand what South Korea and Japan are going to do. In the absence of the United States showing force, South Korea and Japan will show their own force. And there goes any hope of stability in the region. I think maybe I could summarize it like this. And it's unfortunate we have to talk about it in terms of a very real ongoing, potentially nuclear conflict, or tensions is more accurate. It's not a conflict. It's definitely increasing tensions. And I hate that we have to have this discussion in the backdrop of that, but unfortunately that's the nature of this business, right? But the reality of the equation is that if we are not, this is what I want to say. Sometimes aggression is a part of stability. And I said on an episode maybe, I don't know, a month ago, that in the absence of any ability to get world peace, I don't think we're going to ever get world peace. The best we can hope for is stability. We can fight for stability. And in this case, if America does not demonstrate to Japan and South Korea that we are going to aggressively defend them, then it becomes destabilizing because they're going to take it into their own hands. What else do you expect them to do? That's my next question. If anyone disagrees with my theory and my premise, what do you expect North Korea, I keep saying North Korea, forgive me. What do you expect South Korea and Japan to do in this situation? In the absence of the United States being the bully or being the equalizer, depending on what vantage point you want to write this narrative from. What do you expect Japan to do if the United States doesn't swing in like a bat out of hell to aggressively defend Japan and South Korea? The only thing that's left for them to do is for them to do it themselves. And in that framework, that's even more destabilizing to the region, because now you have an escalation in tensions, right, with a nation that borders China, right? And you don't have these escalating tensions just from the United States. You have it from Japan. You have it from South Korea. So there's so many things that could make the situation worse if the United States does not show force and show. And when I say show force, I don't mean to attack. Let's start qualifying this now, right? This is not an excuse to give Donald Trump the ability to preemptively attack with conventional or nuclear weapons, right? Not at all. Not at all. I'm saying on our side of the equation, let's put Donald Trump aside for a minute. Let's put his idiocy aside. Let's put the military industrial complex aside. Let's put American imperialism aside, right? Because we can't go back and rewrite the last 50 years of history. We are where we are right now today. And where we are right now today suggests that where we are right now today is in a situation, in a conundrum where the United States may have to aggressively show that we are going to defend South Korea and Japan because of the actions of North Korea today. The actions of North Korea today are not actions of people who are simply trying to create nuclear weapons for their own defense. Today is a show, and I think maybe I should have started there, right? Okay, again, and I'm trying to get it all in, guys. I'm trying to get it all in, so which means a lot of this is going to be tangential. But, I'm going through this particular argument for anyone who still believes that North Korea is not an aggressor in this equation. They are a belligerent in this equation. They are creating a scenario, a worst case scenario. They are pushing the envelope here, and there's no other way to write this story. Donald Trump did exacerbate the problem before, but now where there was an opportunity for these hostilities to de-escalate, Kim Jong-un has just completely, taken it to another level. So from a progressive perspective, in terms of American aggression historically, American aggression during during the Korean War, all those things, American imperialism, spreading abroad, ever encroaching, our display of strength that we always show against North Korea, our economic sanctions against North Korea, all of that calculated still led us up to before today. And before today, we had a situation that got extremely volatile because of the president of the United States. Then it de-escalated on its own. Well, as far as we know, on its own, with probably any number of back channel communications. I do believe China got involved in it, and it de-escalated. Now, all the history that led up to before today provided Kim Jong-un and the North Korean people an opportunity to not escalate this further. And what did Kim Jong-un do? He escalated it further. So for all of the baggage of the United States, for all the American imperialism, for all of the economic sanctions that hurt the North Korean people, for all of the wrong that we did in the Korean War, for all the dumb stuff that Donald Trump said, it all led to a de-escalation of hostilities as of before today. And where we are today is Kim Jong-un, unprovoked, re-escalated the situation. I have to go. I think it's important for me to make something clear here. The reason I have to go through these rigorous mental exercises, or whatever you want to call it, these vast explanations, is because I exist in a space of progressivism. I am a progressive, but I have accepted a grim reality on the international stage that a lot of my fellow progressives have not accepted. And that is, in the absence of an overarching authority, there is anarchy in the international relations theory definition. There is anarchy and there will be conflict. And I honestly believe that the best that we can do on the international stage, while I appreciate everyone who's yelling at the top of their lungs, peace, 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 I honestly believe, based on all of my studies, the best that we could do is stability. partly because of the structural problems, also partly because of the human condition. But that's just where I am. And so I have to, when I say things to my audience, I need you to understand that this is not a cheap cop out for any type of hawkish foreign policy. This is sitting down and examining the situation and looking at it holistically from a historical perspective as well as a political theory perspective, and really the best that I can come up with. And they're greater minds than mine, way far greater minds than mine who have studied this. It's really the best that we can come up with is stability. And what Kim Jong-un today did was unprovoked and destabilizing. So the ball is in the United States court, right? How does Donald Trump respond to this? Like, I think this is another reason I'm so frustrated with the situation, is because could they have not done this when Obama was in office? You know, Obama would have probably found a way to broker another deal, another nuclear deal, like we did with Iran. You know, versus a cowboy, you know, not even a cowboy, but this cosmopolitan oaf, you know, if those two could be put together, as oxymoronic as that sounds, but this cosmopolitan oaf, this globalist, you know, who doesn't think he's globalist, you know, this moron who believes that, that saying the most ignorant thing is a signal of strength, is the president of the United States. And he has the ability to make what Kim Jong-un did today even more destabilizing by adding his ignorance to it. So, like, could they have not done this a couple years ago? Please. I mean, what I'm saying please for is done. The die is cast. But that's what's so frustrating about it, is now this plays into Donald Trump's hand of looking for an opportunity to be perceived as strong. But here we are. Here we are with two unstable men with nuclear, one with a nuclear arsenal, the other one with a nuke, maybe two. But here we are. And one of them has shot a missile through the airspace of Japan. And now we have to wait and see how does the Trump administration respond to this. I mean, every indication is that they're going to mess this up. And I'm hoping, you know, I have no idea. Honestly, have no idea on how they're going to respond. If they already responded, I haven't. As of me recording this, I have not seen a response. But this is going to be a fast-moving event, so it's very possible that we'll see a response. If not before the end of the show, definitely by first thing tomorrow, we should see how the Trump administration is going to respond. All right, a couple of other things we want to deal with tonight. I want to discuss Joel Osteen. And I forgot the name of his church out there in Houston. But Joel Osteen is getting dragged across social media, Facebook and Twitter, particularly Twitter, but it's spilt over to Facebook. He's getting dragged because he has, I think it was a former Astrodome. I forgot the name of the stadium that he has. But he has a church that seats about 16,000 people. I feel like it seats more when you look at that picture. Like, holy cow, the church looks like it could seat so many more people. But he closed the doors of the church. And instead of opening the doors of the church to people who were stranded, he sent and offered his prayers and well wishes via social media. Social media, Twitter was not having it. And they dragged his beautiful smiling face ass. I mean, digitally, they dragged him across the street and just... I mean, it's been pretty vicious. And, you know, my first instinct was, well, what's he supposed to do if his church is flooded? Like, he can't let anyone in his church and the church is flooded. I mean, why would anyone want to go into a flooded church? Like, why are people just, you know, stunting on Joel Osteen? I mean, besides the fact that people just like doing that because he's Joel Osteen. But I'm like, what can he do? His church is flooded. Then I saw the pictures and... yeah, his church does not look flooded any more than my toilet overflowing. His church looks like it's in pretty decent condition. It's reported that the underground was flooded. But to what extent that actually is, damages the actual building, because that building is prepared to handle that type of flooding. So the question is, like, to what extent does that damage his ability to help people who are homeless right now? And many spectators feel like there is no, that he's just not doing it because, whatever reason. I don't know if it's because he doesn't want the quote unquote riffraff in his church. I honestly think it's a combination of things, and I'd be lying if I told you I didn't have any thoughts about it, because I do have some thoughts. I honestly think some people, pause, rewind. I'm looking at this church. This church seats more than 16,000 people, man. This thing look like it seats about a good god doggone 30,000 people. But they say 16,000. Okay. I think that, oh, no, it gets worse. I can't give you what I think yet. It gets worse. So his response to this was to put up a link on his website for hurricane relief update. And if you click on that for Lakewood Church and Samaritan's Purse International Relief, if you click on that, it takes you to a place where you can donate. Yeah. So instead of opening the doors of his church, or even worse, in response to people dragging him for being tone deaf, this man doesn't open up the doors of his church, or he doesn't even bother to offer an explanation as to why he didn't open the doors of his church. He puts up a link where you can donate and help out Samaritan's Purse International Relief. So in other words, he took up an offering. Dog, like, come on, man. This is the people like this make it so hard to be a Christian sometimes. But anyway, I digress. Here are my thoughts. People are in their own world to their detriment. I'm not saying this is an excuse for him. I'm saying this is where I think his first sin actually is that he's so wrapped up into his world that he does not realize the responsibility that he has to everyone around his world. Like the responsibility that he has to his city, the responsibility that he has to the nation. Yes, you have a responsibility to the city. You have a responsibility to the state. You have a responsibility to the nation. No, it's not in your contract. It's just in your contract of human decency. Like, this is the stuff that you should assume. And you don't assume this if you're not actively thinking about it. And this is what happens, man. People get locked into their own success. They get locked into their own world, and they're not actively thinking about the fact that they owe a debt to society, if for no other reason than good PR. Like, you gotta be incompetent to not realize the negative ramifications of an action like this. Right? You got to be you got to be incompetent to not realize that your thoughts and prayers when you're in the heart of the city and people are stranded are meaningless when you can let people in. Now, let me tell you something. The church that I worked for, let me tell you what we did when a hurricane came through. Once we realized in South Florida, that the facility was actually okay, and it wasn't damaged to the point where it was flooded or anything, and we realized that most people were living fine. What they did not have? They did not have food, and they did not have water, and they did not have ice. And you know what our church did? Our church went and bought as much ice as we could find. We went and bought as much food. We went to all the grocery stores and saw that they were getting ready to throw away food. And you know what we did? We put up a barbecue and we cooked for the entire damn city. We fed, and I was on the grill. I know how many people, we fed so many people. Why? Because it was just, what else are we going to do? Not because it was our calling from God to be, no, it was just decency, human decency. We didn't do it for public relations. We did it because, you know what? We have an opportunity to help, and we seized the opportunity to help. And we spent an entire 24 hours cooking for the city and running ice to people who needed ice in the sweltering heat of the summer in South Florida. And what happens is when you become an overwhelming success, and I hope I have friends around me that if the Benjamin Dixon Show ever gets so successful that I run the risk of forgetting my responsibility. I hope I have friends around me who would say, Ben, you have a responsibility to your city. You have a responsibility to your immediate community. You have a responsibility. What would I look like out here broadcasting in my community, and my community's underwater and I'm safe somewhere broadcasting and I don't give people access to my safe surroundings? It's an absentee thinking. It's absent-mindedness that I think is the first sin here, if I'm going to use that language, because we're talking about Joel Osteen. How do you not realize that your thoughts and prayers are meaningless when you have a responsibility and you've taken so much from a city? That might be the because maybe you're convinced of this. I'm not convinced that they're like, oh, we don't want people in our church. Nah. I think that they're just so wrapped up in, oh, what are we going to do on our next Sunday program? Who's going to be our guest artist next week? What are we going to do about, our youth ministry or whatever? I think they're so absorbed into their own world that they forgot to realize they serve the community. And that, to me, is their first transgression. And that might be the last, because this is costing them dearly. That's not going to cost them in terms of their members. Their members are going to still believe in Osteen. Maybe 10 will be, maybe 100 will be upset because they have a very large church. Maybe 100 will be upset and they'll leave. But the church is going to be fine because the members are going to believe the pastor no matter what. But somebody who, and I've got quite a few listeners, and if you go to Osteen's church, let him know that his mistake was not thinking of his responsibility to the city. And then two, the second transgression is a PR transgression. Like, I'm sorry, we're professionals. We're all professionals. You got some professional PR people on that team. Look at all these graphics they put out. That's just graphical. But somebody they understand marketing. They understand image. They understand the perception, how they're received in the community. This is a PR disaster. Like, even if you're not a good person and you're not going to instantly think about how to serve the community, at least be a professional and realize, if I don't say the right thing here, it could ultimately destroy my brand. Even more so than it's already destroyed. So the second transgression is a PR fiasco. Like, who's advising this dude? Like, if you're worth $50 million, surely you've got some smart people advising you. Or are they too so absorbed in what's going on the next week's service that they can't realize that, they have responsibility to the church? I mean, and maybe they actually physically can't. Maybe there's something happening underneath the ground of the church that we can't see in these pictures that show a pretty passable pathway to the sanctuary. But maybe there's something happening on the ground that is preventing them literally from opening up the church. Why aren't they saying that? Like, that would be the first thing I would say if that was the case, which suggests to me that that's not the case. I'm sorry. I'm guilty. You know what I'm guilty of is analysis paralysis. I don't get paralysis from my analysis, but I always try to, I don't know. I dig in too deep sometimes. Maybe folks just want me to say, oh, he's a snake oil salesman. Yeah, I mean, I think he's a milquetoast, preacher. I think he's just inspirational. God loves you, and I love you. And look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I like the shirt you're wearing. That's him. That's who I think he is. But I guess maybe folks would like for me to just say, oh, he's a charlatan and he's this, that, and the other. Yeah, I mean, Paula White is a charlatan. Joel Osteen is just so self-absorbed into the world of Lakewood Church that he completely forgot the fact that he owed that community just as much as he took. No, he owed that community more than what he took. I mean, this is how do you not do that? How do you not forget about the politics? Forget about the PR. Forget about all that. How do you not just feel this is the shortcoming? This is the real transgression, man. Forget about just being so self-absorbed. How do you not immediately shift gears into thinking, how can I help the people? Okay, so everything else I said before this is really about being practical, being, all this kind of stuff. You got bad PR, you failed there, you're too focused on what you're doing, you didn't take care of your community, you failed there. But still, the biggest transgression of them all is, how do you not have a knee-jerk reaction to say, how can we help as many people as possible? Okay. Well, I guess you guys win. I guess the listeners, you win. I guess y'all were like, Ben, he's not a good dude. Stop trying to I'm not trying to make excuses for him. I'm just trying to help understand. I'm trying to understand how you make a mistake like that. Right. And so that's where the over analysis comes in. I'm honestly trying to understand, how do you make a mistake like that as a professional, right? As a person with a huge team, and as a person who should just be smarter than that. But then forget all of that, and let's just go to because in South Florida, St. John Missionary Baptist Church in South Florida, our gut reaction and instinct was, boom, how can we help as many people as we can? And everybody was there. Everybody was a part of it. The pastor was a part of it. I was a part of it. My musicians were a part of it. The community was a part of it. It was just one big effort. I mean, not only did we feed people and give people ice, like we rallied people with chainsaws who could go through and safely and properly cut down any damaged trees that were blocking people's cars. Like, we just did it. Because it was a knee-jerk reaction. Like, okay, this is how you do it. This is the only thing I can think of. Sorry, folks who love Joel Osteen, but you're not in this. You're not in this business to help people. Because if you're in this business to help people, your first instinct would be, how can we utilize and leverage all of our influence, all of our wealth, and all of our property to help as many people as possible? Like, we didn't have, his church seats 16,000. Our church may seat 1,000 in South Florida. He's worth $50 million. I think my pastor was worth $50,000. Maybe that. And all of our gut instincts was to, how do we help the community? I mean, that's why it's either in you or it's not, man. That's the bottom line. I don't care what your religion is, what your religion ain't. You're either here to help people or you're not. And if you're here to help people, then your first instinct should always be, how can we help? Now, I went through all the machinations of trying to understand it from a perspective of he's just he's self-absorbed, right? And that was projection. I'm gonna be honest with you. That was 100% projection. You know why? Because sometimes Benjamin Dixon gets so self-absorbed that I missed opportunities to help people, particularly some friends. And I've said this on air before. I've said this directly to friends. I've said this directly to people, that sometimes I get so wrapped up into what I'm doing that I miss the opportunity to help a friend. And so I'm just projecting that onto Joel Osteen. Like, I know I have the best of intentions and I would help anybody I could at the drop of a dime, but sometimes I just get so wrapped up into my world that I miss that opportunity. But then I thought about it a little longer. I talked with you long enough. Here's me calling myself out on air. Here's me changing my mind on air. I have to go fully into the column of, he's not in this business to help people. You know why? Because you got too many people around you. You got too many people there to, you have too many resources. For it to not cross your mind that we need to help people, particularly with his response after the fact. His response after the fact was to put up a website for people to donate. No, my dude, you donate. You're worth 50 million. Surely you could spare 500,000. As a gesture, if nothing else, to save your ass in this PR crisis. So anyway, sorry guys, I just thought that through live on air. Please forgive me. But I'm almost at the point I can't understand how you can't understand how you do that. It just makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever, because I come from a different place. The reason I was in ministry, the reason I was in the church was to help people. Like, that's it. And I honestly believe for the longest time that the best way for me to help my community and for me to help people in general was through the church. Because it had such a deeply rooted connection to the community that I felt like we could do more in the community than anybody else. But the whole reason I was there was to help people. And once I realized it wasn't really the best avenue to help as many people as I wanted to help and in the ways I wanted to help them, that's when I left and got involved in politics. But that's a whole different conversation. But the reason I was in church is the same reason I'm in politics, is to help people. And something tells me that if you genuinely are in this to help people, then your alarm bell somewhere over the weekend, your alarm should have gone off and say, I want to help somebody. How do I help as many people as I can? Oh, snap. I've got a church with 16,000 seats in it. Maybe I could get people in that church. And if I can't, and because something's broken down, I would have been out there saying, guys, I'd really love to bring as many people in the church as possible, but, the church is flooded. So we're going to rent out this entire building over here and help as many people as possible. All right. Sorry, guys. I just, again, I came into this saying I'm going to analyze this about Joel Osteen. I'm leaving out saying he's just not in the business of helping people. I am, and that's why I got to just call him out. I don't see how you would go through this entire storm and the first thing on your mind not be using our material resources to help as many people as possible. I don't get it. There's some other things I want to talk about. Joe Arpaio, kind of like, I don't know. You can go see my video on content.news on Joe Arpaio and Donald Trump's pardon. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to cover that has some immediacy to it. Probably not. So I'm going to call it here. Let's call it. And I will get back with you all on tomorrow. Patrons, be sure to catch out the morning stream that I do every morning on Facebook for patrons only. And as much as I possibly can, I get the YouTube version up to you throughout the day. But there's a backlog of all of our morning analyses that you can get access to by going to patreon.com/the BPD show. We are coming up on a brand new show called Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon. And it's a full hour show that's designed for television format. We're going to have a lot of interviewees, a lot of great conversations, panels, guests. We've got a whole team behind it, really piecing it together. So that's coming up really soon. Really, September 12th should be the first show. So less than 2 weeks, or just over 2 weeks away, that we want you to be a part of that. And we'll be having these podcasts, these nighttime show, which should be able to take phone calls starting September 1st. We'll be taking live callers again. We'll be back into the swing of things. But in the meantime, go over to content.news and check out all the stuff that I've done over there. And I continue to do. Hey, thanks for being a supporter. Even if you're not a patron, I still appreciate everything that you do. Watching, sharing, subscribing, liking, and all that good stuff. I will see you next time.